What if the most powerful move you ever made was the one where you kept your mouth shut? Right now, somewhere in the world, a person is walking into a room full of loud voices, confident opinions, and desperate bids for attention. And that person is saying absolutely nothing. No defense. No performance. No explanation. Just stillness, presence, weight, and every single person in that room feels it. The most feared individual in any space is not the loudest. It is the one who speaks last. Or not at all. You have been taught that silence is weakness. That you must explain yourself, justify yourself, prove yourself with words. This book exists to dismantle that lie, completely and permanently. Silent power is not passive. It is the sharpest weapon you will ever hold. Say nothing. Watch everything and win. Chapter 1. Volume is not authority. Silence is. Every room has a temperature. And the moment someone starts talking too much, you can feel it rise. You have been in that room. You know the person. They speak before the question is finished. They fill every pause as if silence were a threat they need to neutralize. They volunteer opinions that no one requested. They laugh a little too quickly, explain a little too thoroughly, and by the time they are done, the room is not impressed. The room is exhausted. And here is the part that most people never stop to examine. That person believes they are connecting. They believe the volume is working. They believe that the more they say, the more they are valued. They are wrong. And they will keep being wrong for the rest of their lives unless someone tells them the truth. The truth is, noise is not confidence. Noise is the sound of someone trying to convince themselves that they belong. Think about the last time you were around someone who spoke constantly. Not someone who was interesting or engaged. Someone who filled every available second with their voice. What did you actually feel? Not what you told them. What you actually felt inside. Tired. Slightly drained. Maybe a little suspicious. Because somewhere in the back of your brain, a signal was firing. A signal that said, this person needs something from me. And they did. They needed your validation. Your attention. Your reassurance that they were worth listening to. Every unnecessary word was a request dressed up as a statement. And your nervous system read it perfectly, even when your manners refused to acknowledge it. This is where most people stop. They notice the pattern in others and never turn the lens on themselves. They never ask, am I doing this? Am I filling the silence because I am confident, or because I am afraid of what silence might reveal about me? Most people react. You choose. And the first choice is this: to stop performing and start being present. Modern culture has sold you a specific lie. It told you that whoever speaks first is the leader. That the person who has the most to say has the most to offer. That silence is awkward, absence is weakness, and the loudest voice is the one worth following. Social media reinforced it. Classrooms rewarded it. Workplaces promoted the talkers, while the thinkers watched from the back of the room. But watch what actually happens over time. The talkers burn bright and disappear. The ones who listened, observed, and waited. Those are the ones who are still there 10 years later, still respected, still relevant, still in the room. The truth is, restraint is a signal. When you hold your words, when you choose precision over volume, when you sit comfortably inside a silence that everyone else is scrambling to fill, you communicate something that no speech can replicate. You communicate that you are not desperate, that you are not seeking, that you have already decided, and you are simply waiting for the moment to act. Neuroscience supports this. People consistently rate quieter individuals as more intelligent, more competent, and more trustworthy. Not because silence proves intelligence, but because the brain reads restraint as control. And control is the oldest marker of power that exists in the human species. Now consider the quiet one. You have met them too. They sit at the edge of a conversation that everyone else is dominating. They do not interrupt. They do not perform. They watch. They listen with the kind of attention that most people only pretend to have. The quiet one is watching your tells. The way your confidence shifts when someone pushes back. The way you laugh when you are nervous. The longer your explanation gets, the less certain you are. The quiet one is watching your contradictions. The gap between what you said an hour ago and what you are defending right now. The quiet one is watching your emotional leaks. Every moment where your ego overruled your judgment. Every moment where the need to be right won over the chance to be accurate. And then they speak. One sentence. Maybe two. And the room shifts. Not because they were louder. Because they were ready. Because they earned the floor with patience, not performance. Most people react. You choose. And the quiet one always chooses wisely. This is where most people stop. They admire the quiet ones from a distance, but never become one. They think it is a personality type. Something you are born with. It is not. It is a discipline. It is a decision made in 1,000 small moments before anyone is watching. The truth is, the most powerful person in any room is not the one who owns the conversation. It is the one who could end it with 4 words and chooses not to. That is the psychology of silent power. And right now, you are only at the beginning of understanding how deep it goes. You have just seen what the noise is hiding. Now it is time to understand what silence is actually saying. Because silence is not empty. It is a language. And in Chapter 2, you will learn to speak it fluently. Chapter 2, Silence Speaks. Learn its language. Every pause you have ever let go of too quickly was a conversation you lost before it began. You ended Chapter 1 standing in front of a simple truth. The loudest person in the room is working the hardest and earning the least. But understanding that noise is weakness is only half the equation. The other half is this: silence is not simply the absence of noise. It is a living, breathing form of communication. And most people have been illiterate in that language their entire lives. Think about the last time someone went quiet on you. Not the comfortable quiet of a person at peace. The deliberate quiet of a person who had decided not to give you what you were reaching for. You felt it immediately. Something shifted in the air between you. Your thoughts started moving faster. You started wondering what they were thinking, what they knew, whether you had said too much. That discomfort you felt was not accidental. It was the silence working on you exactly as it was designed to. The truth is, silence is pressure. And pressure, applied correctly, moves people. Most people spend their entire lives learning how to speak more effectively. How to be more articulate, more persuasive, more engaging. And there is value in that. But the skill that almost no one develops, the skill that separates the merely competent from the genuinely powerful, is the ability to engineer what your silence communicates before a single word leaves your mouth. Your silence can say, "I am not threatened by this." Your silence can say, "I have already considered everything you are about to tell me." Your silence can say, "I am watching, and I find this less impressive than you hoped." Your silence can say, "I am the calmest person in this room, and we both know it." None of these messages requires words. All of them require intention. And intention requires that you stop treating silence as something that happens to you and start treating it as something you deploy. This is where most people stop. They agree intellectually that silence is powerful, and then the next time a conversation gets tense, they talk. They explain. They defend. They negotiate with noise because that is what their body has been trained to do since childhood. You were rewarded for answering. You were corrected for going quiet. You were called shy, disengaged, or difficult when you chose not to speak. And so you learned slowly and completely that silence was a problem to be solved rather than a tool to be mastered. Most people react. You choose. And the choice available to you right now is to unlearn the association between silence and weakness, completely and permanently. Here is what the science tells us, and it is not subtle. When you respond to a question or a provocation with a pause of even 3 to 5 seconds before speaking, the person across from you experiences a measurable spike in psychological discomfort. They begin to question themselves. They wonder if their question was unclear, if their argument was weaker than they thought, if they have misjudged the situation. You have done nothing except wait. And yet the entire dynamic of the exchange has shifted in your favor without a single word of rebuttal. Now add body language to that silence. Steady eye contact. Relaxed shoulders. A face that reveals nothing beyond calm attention. Now your silence is not just a pause. It is a statement. It says, "Whatever you just said, I am not moved." And that is one of the most unsettling things one human being can communicate to another. The truth is, most people are terrified of being unreadable. They want to know where they stand with you. They want your reaction as confirmation that they have registered, that they matter, that they have had an effect. When you deny them that confirmation, you create a vacuum. And human beings are constitutionally incapable of leaving a vacuum alone. They will fill it. With more words. With concessions. With information they never intended to give you. Your silence becomes the most productive part of the conversation, and you have not spent a single word to achieve it. This is where most people stop. They are afraid that silence will make them seem cold, disinterested, or arrogant. They confuse the appearance of warmth with the giving away of power. But consider this. The most magnetic people you have ever encountered were not the ones who talked the most. They were the ones who made you feel most fully heard. And you cannot hear anyone when you are busy filling the air with your own voice. Let them fill the silence. Let them fill the silence with justifications you did not ask for. Let them fill the silence with the truth they were trying to package more carefully. Let them fill the silence with the offer they were holding back, the apology they were resisting, the admission that changes everything. Your job is simply to remain still and let the silence do its work. Most people react. You choose. And the person who chooses stillness over noise chooses power over performance every single time. The truth is, you already know how to use silence. You have felt its power when someone used it on you. You registered it in your body before your mind could name it. You already understand this language. You have simply been too afraid to speak it. Now you are not afraid. Now you know what silence says and how to say it with complete precision. But knowing what silence communicates is one thing. Understanding where this power comes from, why it has shaped every great figure in history, and why the most formidable people who ever walked this earth all shared this one trait is the next question. And the answer goes much further back than you might expect. Chapter 3. Emperors did not explain themselves. Power has always been quiet. You just were not taught to notice it. You left the last chapter with a new understanding of silence as language. A living, engineered form of communication that works on the people around you before you have spoken a word. But here is what you might still be resisting. Some part of you still associates silence with restraint, with holding back, with something you do when you have nothing to say. That part of you is carrying a modern misunderstanding. Because for most of human history, silence was not a restraint. Silence was sovereignty. The truth is, throughout every era of genuine power, the individuals who shaped the world were not its loudest voices. They were its most deliberate ones. Consider Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of the greatest military force the ancient world had ever seen. He could have filled libraries with declarations of his own greatness. He could have used his position to broadcast his intelligence, his vision, his authority, to anyone within earshot. Instead, he wrote privately. He spoke in measured sentences. He ruled in deliberate stillness. His meditations, the journal he wrote for no audience but himself, contain almost no boasting, no self-promotion, no performance. Just a man in relentless dialogue with his own discipline. That restraint was not accidental. It was philosophical. Marcus understood something that most modern leaders have completely forgotten. The moment you begin explaining yourself to people who did not ask, you have already surrendered a portion of your authority. Explanation is a form of seeking approval. And the truly powerful do not seek approval. They make decisions and allow the results to speak with a permanence that words could never match. Most people react. You choose. And Marcus chose, every single day of his reign, to let his actions carry the weight that lesser men spent their words trying to manufacture. Now consider Abraham Lincoln. In cabinet meetings that were often full of experienced, opinionated, and forceful personalities, Lincoln had a habit that unnerved his advisors. He would sit in complete silence while everyone else argued. He would listen with the full weight of his attention as each person made their case, defended their position, and attempted to persuade him. And then, when the room had exhausted itself, he would deliver one sentence. Sometimes two. And the conversation was over. Not because he had out-argued anyone. Because he had outweighted everyone. This is where most people stop. They think the way to lead a room is to dominate the conversation. Lincoln understood that the way to lead a room is to be the last one with anything left to say. And sometimes, the most powerful thing left to say is very little. The truth is, mystery amplifies authority in ways that speeches never can. When people cannot fully read you, they fill the gap with their own imagination. And imagination, almost without exception, generates something more formidable than reality. The unreadable leader becomes larger in the minds of those who follow them. The quiet executive becomes more strategic in how their team perceives them. The person who does not explain their reasoning is assumed to have reasoning so sophisticated that it requires no explanation. This is not manipulation. This is an ancient and completely honest form of social physics. You are not deceiving anyone. You are simply refusing to diminish yourself with unnecessary disclosure. Now move east. Into the philosophy that shaped entire civilizations around the principle of purposeful silence. The Tao Te Ching, written by Lao Tzu over 2,000 years ago, opens with a line that most people quote without understanding. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. What this means in practical terms is direct and radical. The moment you define yourself completely in words, you have already become smaller than you are. The moment you over-explain your position, you have revealed its limits. The moment you announce your power, you have begun to lose it. Sun Tzu built his entire philosophy of warfare around the same principle applied to strategy. The general who reveals the least wins the most. Concealment is not dishonesty. It is discipline. The warrior who cannot be read cannot be countered. The leader who does not telegraph their next move cannot be preempted. And the person in any modern room, any boardroom, any negotiation, any relationship, who maintains that same quality of strategic opacity operates with an advantage so consistent it begins to look like intuition. It is not intuition. It is silence doing its oldest and most effective work. Most people react. You choose. And the choice of every powerful figure throughout history was the same choice available to you right now. Speak less. Reveal less. Observe more. And trust that your actions, your presence, and your patience will build a reputation that no speech could ever construct as durably. This is where most people stop. They admire the historical examples and then immediately begin composing their next unnecessary explanation to someone who did not ask for it. They understand the lesson in theory and abandon it in practice the moment discomfort arrives. The truth is, power has never been loud. It has been deliberate. It has moved through rooms like a current you feel before you understand it. It has shaped outcomes without announcing its intentions. It has been patient in ways that the anxious and the insecure could never sustain. And here is what every emperor, every philosopher, every general, every quietly formidable person in human history understood at the deepest level. You do not build authority by telling people you have it. You build authority by consistently behaving as someone who has never needed to say so. That behavior begins in the body. It begins in the way you carry yourself before a word is exchanged, before anyone in the room has had a single chance to evaluate you. It begins in something so fundamental that most people walk past it every day of their lives without ever examining it. Chapter 4. Your body speaks before your mouth does. Before you open your mouth, the room has already made a decision about you. You left the last chapter understanding something that history has confirmed across every era and every culture. The quietly powerful have always outlasted the loudly ambitious. The restraint of Marcus Aurelius, the patience of Lincoln, the strategic concealment of Sun Tzu. These were not personality quirks. They were practiced disciplines rooted in a single understanding. That real authority does not announce itself. It is felt. And the first place it is felt is not in your words. It is in your body, the way it moves, the way it holds space, the way it communicates everything about your internal state before your voice ever enters the room. The truth is, human beings read bodies the way they used to read the sky. For survival. For information. For the answer to one ancient question, is this person someone I should follow, or someone I should fear? And that reading happens in fractions of a second, long before rational thought has a chance to intervene. Think about the last time someone walked into a room, and you felt something shift before they spoke. Maybe it was the pace of their walk. Unhurried. Deliberate. Not slow in the way of someone uncertain, but slow in the way of someone who owns the ground they are crossing. Maybe it was the way they stood. Not stiff. Not posed. Simply still. Taking up the space they were entitled to without apology and without performance. Maybe it was the way their eyes moved. Not darting. Not searching for reassurance. Settling. Landing. Staying. You felt that. You registered it in your chest before your brain had a name for it. That is the body speaking. That is presence without a single word. And it is the most honest signal a human being can broadcast, because it is almost impossible to fake for any sustained length of time. Most people react. You choose. And the choice to control your physical presence is one of the most powerful investments you will ever make in your social authority. Start with pace. The speed at which you move through the world is a constant broadcast about your relationship with pressure. People who are anxious move quickly. They sit down fast, stand up abruptly, gesture in sharp bursts, cross rooms with a kind of urgency that communicates, I am slightly behind, I am slightly overwhelmed, I am slightly unsure of my welcome here. People who carry genuine authority move slowly. Not lazily. Deliberately. Every movement has a quality of intention behind it. They sit as if they chose that chair specifically. They stand as if they decided to be exactly there. The room accommodates their pace rather than the other way around. This is where most people stop. They understand this intellectually and then rush to their next meeting, take their seat before they have even settled their breath, and wonder why no one in the room seems to take them as seriously as they deserve. Now consider your posture. Not the military rigidity of someone performing with confidence. The relaxed, grounded posture of someone who has nothing to defend. Shoulders that are not drawn up toward the ears with stress but resting naturally, slightly back, open. A spine that is neither collapsed in submission nor rigid with tension, but simply upright in the way of someone whose thoughts are clear and whose presence is intentional. This posture does not shout authority. It radiates it. And the difference between those two things is everything. The truth is, your nervous system and the nervous systems of everyone around you are in constant communication through your body. When you are tense, they feel tension. When you are unsettled, they register a threat. When you are calm and genuinely calm, not perform calm but the deep stillness of a person who has practiced presence, the people around you begin to regulate downward toward your frequency. You become the emotional anchor of the room without saying a single word. That is not a metaphor. That is biology. Now go to the eyes. Of all the instruments of silent communication available to you, the eyes are the most powerful and the most neglected. Most people make eye contact in quick, anxious flickers. They look away, they look back, they scan. It is the visual equivalent of nervous speech. It broadcasts the same message. I am not entirely sure of my right to be here. The silently powerful person holds eye contact with warmth and without urgency. They look at the person they are with as if that person is the most interesting thing in the room, and they stay there, not staring in the cold, aggressive way of someone trying to dominate. Looking at the full present way of someone who is genuinely engaged and completely unafraid. That quality of attention is one of the rarest experiences available in modern human interaction. And when someone receives it, they feel simultaneously honored and slightly outmatched. Because they sense correctly that the person looking at them is not performing interest. They are gathering it. Most people react. You choose. And the choice to make your physical presence match the internal discipline you are building is not vanity. It is congruent. It is the alignment of who you are becoming on the inside with what the room sees on the outside. This is where most people stop. They do the inner work and neglect the outer signal. They develop genuine depth and then broadcast nervousness with their body, creating a contradiction that the room resolves in the wrong direction. The truth is, still water runs deep. And the person in any room whose hands are calm, whose breath is even, whose movements are deliberate and unhurried, is the person that everyone else is quietly watching. Not because they have done anything dramatic. Because they have done something rare. They have brought their entire self into the room without leaking any of it unnecessarily. Your body is speaking right now. To every room you enter. To every person who watches you before you have had a chance to choose your words. The question is whether what it says matches the power you are building within yourself. You now have the physical foundation. You understand what your body broadcasts and how to engineer that broadcast with intention. But the body is only the container. What fills it, what directs it, what makes the stillness genuine rather than performed, is the mind behind it. Specifically, the way that the mind observes, processes, and chooses when to act. Chapter 5. Observe first. Respond never. Win always. Most people walk into a room ready to be seen. The powerful walk-in is ready to see. You left the last chapter with something concrete. The understanding that your body is a broadcast, constant and honest, and that the discipline of silent power begins in the way you carry yourself before a single word is exchanged. Your pace. Your posture. Your eyes. These are not cosmetic adjustments. They are the physical expression of an internal state. And that internal state, the one that makes the stillness genuine rather than performed, is built on a single cognitive habit that separates the observer from the performer in every room, every conversation, and every moment of consequence. That habit is observation. Not casual noticing. Not passive awareness. Deliberate, systematic, unhurried observation. The kind that treats every social environment as a source of intelligence and every person in it as an open book that most people are too busy talking to read. The truth is, the person who speaks constantly is collecting almost no information. Every second their mouth is open is a second their mind is composing rather than receiving. They are managing their performance, monitoring the reaction, preparing the next point, and defending the last one. They are fully occupied with themselves. And while they are occupied with themselves, the observer is reading everything they are missing. Think about what is actually available in any room full of people, if you are quiet enough to receive it. You can see who defers to whom before the meeting officially starts. You can hear the slight tension in someone's voice when a particular topic is introduced. You can watch the micro-expression that crosses a face in the half-second before the composed response arrives. You can notice who looks at whom when a decision is announced, because that glance tells you exactly where the real power in the room actually lives. None of this information is hidden. All of it is broadcast openly and continuously. But it is only available to the person who is not too busy performing to receive it. Most people react. You choose. And the choice to observe before you act is the choice to operate on intelligence rather than impulse. This is where most people stop. They understand the value of observation in theory, but cannot resist the pull of participation. The conversation starts, and the need to be heard arrives like a physical sensation. The desire to contribute, to demonstrate knowledge, to signal intelligence, overrides the more powerful move of staying quiet and letting the room reveal itself. That pull is not a weakness. It is conditioning. Years of being rewarded for the right answer, for the quick contribution, for the visible engagement. Unlearning it takes deliberate practice and a very specific shift in what you decide to value. Start valuing information over impression. The moment you stop trying to be the most visible person in the room and start trying to be the most informed, everything changes. Your silence stops feeling like restraint and starts feeling like strategy. You are not holding back. You are collecting. Every exchange that you observe without joining adds another data point to your understanding of the people around you. Their priorities, their fears, their blind spots, their real positions beneath the positions they perform. The truth is, the smartest person in the room asks the fewest questions out loud. Not because they have nothing to learn, but because they have already answered most of their questions through observation, and the ones they cannot answer yet, they know better than to reveal. When you ask a question publicly, you announce what you do not know. When you observe quietly, you learn without advertising your gaps. The observer always has more information than the room suspects. And that asymmetry is one of the most durable advantages available to a human being in any competitive environment. Now consider non-reaction. This is the second pillar of the observer mindset, and it is the one that most people find the most difficult to sustain under pressure. Non-reaction is not indifference. It is not coldness. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the complete command of your visible response to what you are feeling. Something happens. Something is said. Something goes wrong, or something goes unexpectedly well. And you do not change. Your face does not betray you. Your body does not shift. Your voice, when you eventually use it, does not carry the emotional charge of the moment. That is the most disorienting experience you can create for another person. Not aggression. Not a rebuttal. Not the cold shoulder. Simply the absence of the reaction they came for. Most people react. You choose. And when you choose not to react, you do something profound. You deny the other person the emotional feedback that confirms their move landed. You refuse to play the role they scripted for you. You force them to recalculate in real time without the information they were counting on. And while they recalculate, you continue to observe, to collect, to understand the situation at a depth they cannot reach because they are too busy managing their own next move. This is where most people stop. They hold the non-reaction for a moment, and then the biological pull becomes too strong. The need to defend, to clarify, to show that you understood what just happened. And in that moment of giving in, all the power that the silence had been building is released back into the room. Hold it. Hold the stillness past the point where it feels comfortable. Hold it past the point where your instincts are screaming at you to say something. Because in that discomfort, in that 5-second stretch of absolute stillness, is exactly where your authority is being built. Every time you hold that line, you are training your nervous system to stop treating silence as a threat and start experiencing it as ground. Solid, unshakable, completely yours. The truth is, the chess player who wins is not always the one who moves most aggressively. It is the one who has seen 10 moves ahead while the opponent is still reacting to the last one. That is what observation creates. Not just information about the present. A map of the likely future. Because people are consistent. Their patterns repeat. Their emotional triggers fire in recognizable sequences. And the observer, who has been watching without the distraction of their own performance, has already seen the pattern before the other person has finished executing it. The quiet one is watching your tells. The quiet one is watching your contradictions. The quiet one is watching every moment where your confidence is performed rather than felt. And when the quiet one finally speaks, it is not because they have run out of patience. It is because they have run out of need for more information. They know enough. They have seen enough. And what they choose to say with that knowledge in that moment lands with a precision that no amount of volume could ever replicate. You are that person now. or you are becoming them. And the becoming requires one more layer. Because of the observer mindset, this discipline of watching and waiting and choosing with full information does not live only in silence. It must eventually translate into speech. And the way a silently powerful person speaks is as different from ordinary conversation as silence is from noise. Chapter 6. Speak less. Land harder. Always. A single sentence, placed precisely, ends conversations that hours of argument never could. You left the last chapter as an observer. Patient. Informed. Unhurried. You have been in the room, reading it, mapping it, understanding the people in it at a level they have not extended to themselves. And now the moment arrives. The moment where your silence has done everything silence can do, and the situation calls for you to speak. This is where most people undo everything. They have held the quiet beautifully, and then when it is finally time to use their voice, they spend it like someone who has been holding their breath for too long. Everything comes out at once. The insight gets buried in the preamble. The power of the pause is dissolved by the length of the response. And the person who was commanding the room through stillness becomes, in the moment of speaking, just another voice in the noise. The truth is, how you speak when you finally speak matters as much as how long you waited to do it. Maybe more. Start with this principle. Words are currency. And like all currency, their value is entirely determined by scarcity. The person who speaks constantly has devalued their own words to almost nothing. By the time they arrive at something important, the room has learned not to listen for it. Because important and unimportant arrive at the same pace, in the same volume, with the same energy. There is no signal. There is only more noise. But the person who speaks rarely, who measures every contribution, who treats each sentence as a resource that costs something to spend, creates a completely different listening environment. The room does not drift when they speak. The room arrives. Because the room has learned, through consistent experience, that when this person opens their mouth, something worth hearing is about to land. Most people react. You choose. And the choice to spend your words as if they cost something is the choice to make every word land with the weight it deserves. This is where most people stop. They agree with the principle and then immediately justify their verbosity. They tell themselves that their situation requires explanation. Their audience needs context. The complexity of the subject demands elaboration. Sometimes this is true. More often, it is the ego constructing a reason to keep talking. Because talking feels productive. Talking feels engaged. Talking feels like doing something. But in the economy of respect, unnecessary talking is not doing something. It is spending the credibility you built with your silence, one unnecessary sentence at a time. The discipline is this. Before you speak, run every word through a single filter. Is this necessary? Not only is it true. Not only is it interesting. Is it something I want them to know? Is it necessary? Does this sentence move something forward, resolve something important, or change something that needs to be changed? If the answer is no, keep it. Not because you are hiding it. Because you are protecting the weight of the words that are necessary. Every sentence you eliminate that was serving your performance rather than your purpose makes the sentences that remain more powerful by contrast. Now consider the question as a precision instrument. Most people ask questions to demonstrate curiosity, to fill silence, or to create the appearance of engagement. The silently powerful person asks questions for one reason: to move the situation in a specific direction without appearing to steer it. One question, placed at exactly the right moment in a conversation, can do things that pages of argument cannot. It can expose a flawed assumption without attacking it directly. It can redirect an entire discussion without announcing the redirection. It can create a silence in the other person where there was confidence a moment before. And it can accomplish all of this while you appear to be doing nothing more than seeking clarification. The truth is, the most powerful question is never the one that shows how much you know. It is the one that reveals how much the other person has not yet considered. 4 words, asked calmly and without urgency, can dismantle an hour of confident reasoning. And when you ask that question and then go quiet, completely quiet, and let the other person sit inside the gap it has created, you have done more with one sentence than most people achieve in an entire conversation. Most people react. You choose. And the choice to ask one precise question rather than deliver one extended argument is the choice of someone who understands that conversations are not won by who has the most to say. They are won by those who understand the situation most completely. And you, having observed before you spoke, already do. This is where most people stop. They have the insight. They have the perfectly formed question. And then they add 3 sentences of context before they ask it, 2 sentences of softening around it, and 1 sentence of explanation after it. They bury the scalpel in packaging. They are afraid that the directness will seem aggressive, that the brevity will seem dismissive, that the precision will seem calculated. It is calculated. That is exactly what makes it effective. Precision is not coldness. Precision is respect. It says, I have thought carefully enough about this conversation to bring you only what matters. When you speak, it should feel like a decision. Not a reflex. Not a performance. A conscious, deliberate choice to release something that has been weighed and found worth the cost. When you speak, it should feel like a decision, and the room should register the difference between your words and the ambient noise surrounding them. Not because you have announced their importance. Because the quality of your restraint has been advertising their value this entire time. The truth is, the greatest communicators in every field share one characteristic that has nothing to do with eloquence, charisma, or vocabulary. They make you feel that every word they give you is chosen specifically for you, in this moment, from a store of words they could have given but did not. That feeling is not accidental. It is the product of restraint. It is what silence creates in the spaces between sentences. And it is available to you, in every conversation, every time you choose depth over volume and precision over performance. You have built the observer. You have refined the voice. You understand the economics of words and the power of the perfectly placed question. But here is the situation that tests it all. Here is the moment that reveals whether the silent power is real or only performed. Someone walks into your space and is not interested in an exchange. They are interested in a reaction. They want to see if the stillness breaks. They want to know if the composure is structural or cosmetic. They are going to push. And how you respond in that moment determines everything about the authority you have spent this entire book constructing. Chapter 7. Do not give them the reaction they came for. The attack was never about you. It was always about what they needed from you. You arrived at this chapter having built something real. The stillness in your body. The patience of the observer. The precision of your words. The quiet authority that has been accumulating through every chapter, like a structure going up floor by floor. And now someone is standing at the base of that structure with the specific intention of making it shake. Not because they have evaluated you honestly and found a genuine weakness, but because your composure unsettles them. Because the person who cannot be read cannot be managed. And people who are used to managing others through emotional provocation experience the unreadable person not as impressive but as threatening. So they push. And the push comes in many forms. A public criticism designed to make you defend yourself. A dismissive comment is deployed in front of an audience. A question framed to humiliate rather than to understand. A comparison that positions you beneath someone else. A silence of their own, cold and pointed, intended to make you nervous enough to fill it with something they can use. These are not accidents. These are techniques. Tested, refined, and highly effective against anyone who still needs other people's reactions to confirm their own stability. The truth is, provocation is not an attack on who you are. It is an attempt to transfer emotional chaos from one person to another. The provocateur is not strong. They are destabilized and attempting to restabilize by destabilizing you. The moment you understand this, the entire dynamic changes. Because you stop experiencing the provocation as something to be answered and start experiencing it as information. Information about the internal state of the person in front of you. Information that makes you more knowledgeable and the more exposed with every second you choose not to react. Most people react. You choose. And the choice not to react is not the choice of someone who did not hear the provocation. It is the choice of someone who heard it completely, understood it fully, and decided it did not meet the threshold required for a response. This is where most people stop. They know intellectually that reacting is a loss. They have read it, heard it, and agreed with it 100 times. And then the provocation arrives in a real room with real stakes and real witnesses, and the body fires before the mind can intervene. The jaw tightens. The voice rises. The explanation begins. And in the space of 3 seconds, every ounce of authority that the silence built is spent in a single reactive moment that the provocateur engineered and invited and was ready for. Because here is what most people never understand about provocation. The provocateur has prepared for your reaction. They have not prepared for your stillness. They have scripted the argument they will have with your defensiveness. They have preloaded the responses to your rebuttal. They have mapped out exactly how this exchange will go once you take the first step they laid out for you. What they have absolutely no script for is the person who receives the provocation, holds it calmly, and does nothing with it. That response, or rather that non-response, dismantles their entire architecture. And they are left holding a weapon in front of someone who refuses to be wounded. Here are 3 responses that neutralize provocation without a single word of rebuttal. The first is sustained, calm eye contact held for 3 full seconds after the provocation lands. Not aggressive staring. Not cold dismissal. The warm, unhurried attention of someone who has heard everything and found it less significant than the speaker intended. Those 3 seconds are one of the longest silences most people will ever sit in a social context. And it lands on the provocateur like a verdict. The second response is a single, slow nod. No agreement. Not submission. Acknowledgement. The nod of someone who has registered the comment, filed it in its appropriate category, and is moving forward without reorienting their entire position in response to it. That nod conveys something devastating to the person who provoked it. It says, "I heard you. It was not enough." The third response is the most powerful and the most difficult to execute. Continue exactly what you were doing, at exactly the same pace, with exactly the same energy, as if nothing of significance had occurred. Because to you, nothing of significance has occurred. You have received an attempt at destabilization, and it has found no purchase. You are exactly where you were. The room sees this. The room registers it. And the person who threw the stone watches it land in still water and watches the water return to still, and they understand, perhaps for the first time, that they have encountered someone they cannot move. The truth is, you cannot humiliate the person who does not flinch. Humiliation requires your participation. It requires that you accept the frame being offered, that you experience the comment as the wound it was designed to be, and that you respond in a way that confirms the wound landed. The moment you withdraw that participation, the entire mechanism of the provocation collapses. You are not fighting the provocateur. You are simply declining to be the other half of the transaction they need. Most people react. You choose. And the choice not to flinch is not a choice made in the moment of provocation. It is a choice made in every quiet moment of practice before that moment arrives. It is built through the stillness in Chapter 4. It is built through the observation in Chapter 5. It is built through the economy of words in Chapter 6. Every discipline you have been developing in this book has been preparing your nervous system for exactly this moment. The moment where the pressure is highest and the silence is hardest, and the authority you have built is either confirmed or surrendered. This is where most people stop. They hold the composure once or twice, and then they encounter a provocation that is more personal, more public, or more persistent than the ones before. And they tell themselves that this one is different. That this one requires a response. That staying silent now would be a weakness. But ask yourself honestly, Is that assessment coming from wisdom or from pain? Is the need to respond strategic, or is it the ego refusing to absorb a hit without returning one? The silently powerful person can tell the difference. Not always in the moment, but with practice, earlier and earlier. And the ability to sit with that distinction, to feel the pull of the reaction and consciously choose the stillness anyway, is one of the most advanced forms of personal power available to a human being. The truth is, the stone thrown into still water teaches you nothing about the depth of the water. The water simply accepts the stone, returns to still, and reveals nothing. That is what you are becoming. Not a person who is never disturbed. A person whose disturbance leaves no visible trace. A person whose surface reflects the same calm whether the day has been easy or catastrophic. A person who cannot be read, cannot be moved, and cannot be used as a tool for someone else's emotional regulation. You have now built the full architecture of silent power from the inside out. The understanding that noise is weakness. The language of silence. The historical proof of its authority. The physical discipline of presence. The observer mindset. The precision of speech. The composure under attack. This is not a set of techniques. This is a way of being. And a way of being does not stay contained to one area of life. It moves into every relationship, every professional environment, every leadership challenge, every moment of connection that you carry from this day forward. Chapter 8. The quiet ones are remembered longest. The people you remember most deeply are rarely the ones who spoke the most. They are the ones who made you feel most completely heard. You left the last chapter having passed the hardest test that silent power faces. The provocation. The deliberate attempt to crack the composure, to draw the reaction, to confirm that the stillness was only ever a performance. And you did not give them what they came for. You held the line. You returned to still. And in doing so, you confirmed something important. Not to the room. To yourself. That this is not a strategy you are trying to use. It is a standard you are becoming. And a standard, once internalized, does not stay in the boardroom, the negotiation, or the tense social exchange. It moves into everything. Into the way you lead. Into the way you love. Into the ordinary daily texture of every relationship you carry and every space you inhabit. Because silent power is not situational. It is structural. And this chapter is about what that structure builds over a lifetime of consistent, quiet, unhurried presence. The truth is, the loudest leader in a room creates followers who perform for approval. And performance for approval is the most fragile foundation on which any team, any relationship, any culture can be built. Because the moment the approval wavers, the performance collapses. The moment the loud leader stops broadcasting enthusiasm, the people who were energized by that broadcast have nothing internal to sustain them. They were running on someone else's fuel. And borrowed fuel always runs out. The quiet leader builds something completely different. They build people who think for themselves. Not because the quiet leader demands independence, but because they create the conditions for it. They listen with the full weight of their attention. They ask one question where another leader would issue 10 directives. They sit in silence long enough for the people around them to reach their own conclusions rather than reaching out and doing the thinking for them. And the people who grow in that environment do not grow dependent. They grow capable. They grow confident. They grow into the kind of individuals who carry that leader's culture forward long after the leader has left the room. Most people react. You choose. And the choice to lead through presence rather than performance is the choice that builds organizations, teams, and relationships that outlast you. This is where most people stop. They want to lead, but they cannot tolerate the silence of restraint. They cannot sit in a meeting and let someone work through a problem at their own pace without stepping in to accelerate the process. They cannot hold a question without answering it themselves before the room has had time to engage with it. They fill the leadership space with their own voice because the alternative, the silence of a leader who is watching and waiting and trusting, feels uncomfortably like absence. It is not an absence. It is the highest form of presence available to someone in a position of authority. It is the presence that says, "I believe you are capable of this," without me narrating every step. Think about the leaders in your own life who left the deepest marks. Not the ones with the most dynamic presentations or the most quotable speeches. The ones who sat across from you in a moment of difficulty and did not immediately reach for a solution. The ones who looked at you with the full weight of their attention and asked one question and then waited, genuinely waited, for you to answer it. The ones whose silence in your hardest moments communicated something that no amount of advice ever could. It said, "I am here. I am not going anywhere. And I trust you to find your way through this." That is leadership at its most permanent. And it is built entirely from the discipline of silence. The truth is, the quiet leader is the one people follow into uncertainty. Not because they are the loudest voice of reassurance, but because their stillness in the face of uncertainty communicates something the nervous system of every person around them registers and responds to. If they are not panicking, perhaps this is survivable. If they are not scrambling, perhaps there is a plan. The calm of the quiet leader becomes the permission structure for everyone else's calm. And that is an influence so deep it operates below the level of conscious thought. Now bring this into the most intimate spaces of your life. Because silent power is not limited to the professional environment. It belongs most essentially to the people you are closest to. And here it asks the most of you, because here the stakes are highest, the history is longest, and the temptation to fill silence with words is strongest of all. In personal relationships, the ability to sit in silence with another person without discomfort is one of the most honest measures of intimacy. Think about the earliest stages of any significant relationship. The silences are quickly, anxiously filled with conversation that is partly genuine and partly a performance of ease that has not yet arrived. As the relationship deepens, the silences change. They become less anxious, less urgent. And eventually, if the relationship reaches its fullest depth, the silences become the most honest form of communication between two people. Not the absence of connection. Its presence is so complete that it no longer requires constant verbal confirmation. Most people react. You choose. And the choice to be fully present without filling every moment with words is the choice to offer someone the rarest gift available in modern human relationships. Your complete, unhurried, undivided attention. With no performance attached to it. This is where most people stop. They are afraid of what silence in a close relationship might mean. They have been conditioned to read quietness as distance, as withdrawal, as the beginning of something wrong. And so they talk, continuously and anxiously, to prove that nothing is wrong. But all that talking does is ensure that nothing is truly felt. Because feeling requires space. Feeling requires the silence in which it can surface, be recognized, and be witnessed by another person without immediately being dissolved by words. The truth is, presence is the gift that words cannot deliver. You can say all the right things and leave someone feeling profoundly alone. You can say almost nothing and leave someone feeling completely held. The difference is not in the words. It is in the quality of your attention. The willingness to be in the moment with another person without agenda, without advice, without the need to make the moment serve your own comfort. That willingness is what the silently powerful person brings into every close relationship they hold. And it is felt immediately and remembered permanently. Think about grief. Think about the moments in human life that are too large for language. The moments when someone you love is in pain so deep that no sentence reaches it. In those moments, the person who tries to fix it with words, who rushes to the silver lining, who offers the perspective that is technically correct but emotionally tone-deaf, that person leaves the grieving one more alone than before they arrived. But the person who sits down, stays, and says almost nothing, who simply witnesses without commentary, without agenda, without the need to make the pain manageable for their own comfort, that person is never forgotten. They become, in the memory of the person they sat with, the definition of what it means to truly be there. The quiet ones are remembered longest. Not because they were the most impressive in the room, Because they were the most present in the moment. Because they gave their attention completely, spent their words sparingly, and left every space they occupied slightly more honest, slightly more human, and significantly more still than they found it. Most people react. You choose. And the choice to become someone whose presence is felt rather than whose volume is heard is the choice that makes you irreplaceable. Not in the transactional sense. In the deepest sense. The sense that lives in the memory of the people who were lucky enough to be in your orbit. Long after the details of what you said have faded. Long after the specific words are gone. What remains is the feeling of being in your presence. And that feeling, built from silence, from attention, from restraint, is the most lasting impression a human being can make on another. The truth is, the room you are in right now will be forgotten. The conversation you had yesterday will mostly fade. But the person who sat across from you in your hardest moment and did not look away, who did not reach for their phone, who did not offer a solution when what you needed was a witness, that person lives in you permanently. Be that person. In every room. In every relationship. In every moment where the temptation is to speak, and the deeper call is to stay. You have now understood silent power in its full dimension. How it operates in history, in the body, in the mind, in conversation, under pressure, and in the intimate architecture of the relationships that define your life. But there is one final question. The question that everything in this book has been moving toward. Not what silent power does in specific situations. Who it makes you permanently as a person. Not a strategy you apply. An identity you inhabit. And the becoming of that identity is what the next chapter is entirely about. Chapter 9. Become someone silence comes naturally to. There is a version of you that does not need to explain itself. That version is not as far away as you think. You left the last chapter with an understanding of something most people never fully grasp. That silent power is not a tool you pick up for certain situations and set down when the stakes are lower. It is a way of being that reaches into every room, every relationship, every quiet moment of daily life. It changes how you lead, how you love, and how you occupy space in the world. But understanding that truth intellectually and living it consistently are two different things. And the gap between them is where most people spend their entire lives, knowing better and doing otherwise, because the knowing has not yet reached deep enough to change the default. The default is what this chapter is about. Not the moments when you remember to apply the discipline. The moments when you have forgotten to think about it at all, and the discipline is simply there, already operating, already choosing, already still. That is not a distant achievement. That is the natural result of a specific kind of practice applied with consistency over time. And it begins with the most fundamental question this book can ask you. Who are you when no one is watching? Not who you are in the boardroom or the negotiation, or the tense social exchange. Who are you in the car alone? Who are you in the grocery store when the line is moving slowly? Who you are in the moment just after someone says something that irritates you and before you decide how to respond. Who you are in the private, unwitnessed seconds of daily life that no one will ever evaluate or applaud. Because that is where the identity is actually being built or abandoned. Not in the grand moments of visible composure. In the 10,000 small moments that no one sees. The truth is, the person who is calm in public but chaotic in private has not developed silent power. They have developed a performance of it. And performances are exhausting to maintain because they require constant energy and constant vigilance. The genuine article requires neither, because it is not a layer applied over the self. It is the self. And becoming that self is entirely possible, but it requires you to stop treating silence and stillness as techniques and start treating them as standards. Standards you hold for yourself in private with the same consistency you hold them in public. Most people react. You choose. And the choosing must happen in private first, repeatedly, invisibly, before it becomes reliable in the moments that matter. Start here. The next time you feel the impulse to speak unnecessarily, in any context, pause for 1 full second before you do. Not to suppress the words. To examine them. Ask the question you have been practicing throughout this book. Is this necessary? And in that 1-second pause, notice what the impulse is actually made of. Is it a genuine contribution? Or is it the need to be seen contributing? Is it useful information? Or is it the ego confirming its own presence? That 1 second of examination, practiced consistently, begins to rewire the default. Slowly at first, then faster, then automatically. This is where most people stop. They practice the pause in low-stakes situations and abandon it the moment the stakes rise. The high-pressure meeting. The argument with someone they love. The moment when speaking feels urgent and silence feels impossible. But this is exactly the moment the practice was designed for. And the reason it fails under pressure for most people is not lack of willpower. It is a lack of accumulated repetition. You cannot build muscle on the day of the race. The discipline must already live in the body before the body needs it most. So build it in the ordinary moments. Build it in conversations where nothing important is at stake. Choose the pause when you do not need to. Choose the shorter answer when the longer one would be socially uncomfortable. Choose the moment of observation when participation would be easier and less revealing. Every time you make the quieter choice in an ordinary moment, you are making a deposit into an account that pays out in the extraordinary ones. The truth is, the version of you that says less is more of yourself. Not a diminished version. Not a withholding version. A cleaner, clearer, more deliberate version. Freed from the noise of performance. Freed from the constant work of managing what other people think about every sentence you produce. Freed from the exhausting cycle of speaking and then wondering whether it landed, whether it was too much, whether you revealed something you should have protected. The person who says less has fewer things to regret, fewer positions to defend, and far more room to simply be present in the experience of their own life. Now consider the reputation that this practice builds over time. Not overnight. Not in a single impressive exchange. Over months and years of consistent behavior in the direction of depth. The people around you begin to notice things they cannot entirely articulate. They notice that you are different after a difficult meeting than before it. That the things that visibly unsettle others seem to pass through you without leaving a mark. That's when you do speak. It tends to matter. That your presence in a room has a quality that they associate with reliability, with gravity, with the particular safety of someone whose reactions are predictable, not because they are robotic, but because they are rooted. That reputation is not built through a single act of dramatic composure. It is built through the accumulation of small, consistent, quiet choices. The choice to listen when speaking would be easier. The choice to observe when performing would be more comfortable. The choice to hold the pause 1 second longer than necessary. The choice to respond from stillness rather than react from emotion. Each one invisible. Each one is foundational. Together, they construct something that no single impressive moment could ever build alone. They construct a person. A specific, trustworthy, deeply consistent kind of person that the world is always looking for and almost never finds. Most people react. You choose. And the choosing, done consistently in the private, ordinary moments of daily life, is what eventually makes the choice effortless. That is the threshold you are crossing. Not from trying to try. From discipline to nature. From technique to identity. This is where most people stop. Not because they are unwilling. Because they are impatient. They practice for a week and expect a transformation. They hold the pause in 3 conversations and wonder why the reputation has not shifted yet. They apply the discipline in the moments they remember, and then measure themselves against the ones they forgot. But transformation does not work that way. It works beneath the surface, invisibly, accumulating without announcement, until one day someone says something to you that a year ago would have sent you into a defensive spiral, and you simply look at them calmly, let the silence do its work, and move on without a trace of the old reaction. And in that moment, you will know. Not because someone told you. Because the space where the old self used to fire is quiet. And that quiet is permanent. The truth is, the version of you that says less is more of yourself. More whole. More honest. More present. More powerful in the way that actually matters. Not louder. Not more visible. Not more impressive in terms of performance. More real. More grounded. More completely there. You have now traveled through every dimension of this philosophy. From the noise trap to the architecture of presence. From the history of silent power to its daily practice. From the composed body to the observer's mind. From precise speech to composure under fire. From leadership and love to the private daily discipline of becoming. There is one chapter left. And it is not a lesson. It is a commitment. It is the moment you decide that everything in this book is not something you have tried. It is something you are. Chapter 10. This is not a strategy. It is who you are. Every discipline you have practiced in this book has been pointing toward one thing. Not a technique. A person. You have arrived at the final chapter, carrying something different from what you brought to the first. You came in surrounded by noise. The noise of a culture that rewards volume. The noise of a lifetime of conditioning that taught you to explain, to justify, to perform, to fill every silence before it could reveal anything true about you. You came in believing, in ways you may not have even been aware of, that the person who speaks most commands most. That confidence is loud. That authority announces itself. That silence is the posture of the uncertain and the unseen. None of that is true. And you know it now in a way that goes deeper than intellectual agreement. You have felt it across every chapter. In the image of the emperor who did not explain himself. In the 3-second pause that shifts the entire dynamic of a conversation. In the still water that accepts the stone and returns to itself without drama. In the quiet leader whose team grows capable rather than dependent. In the private ordinary moment where the pause was held, the impulse was examined, and the quieter choice was made with no audience and no applause. You have felt this truth in the body, and what we feel in the body does not leave the same way the things we only think do. The truth is, there is a moment in every genuine transformation where the tool becomes the person. Where the strategy stops being something you remember to apply and becomes something you simply are. You no longer think about the pause. You are the pause. You no longer practice non-reaction. You are the stillness. You no longer choose your words carefully because you are monitoring your performance. You choose them carefully because careless words feel foreign to the person you have become. That moment is not an event with a date. It is the invisible crossing of a threshold built from accumulated practice. And some of you are closer to that threshold right now than you realize. Most people react. You choose. And by now, that sentence is not a reminder. It is a description. This is where most people stop. Not from this book, but from the work itself. They feel the shift beginning. They experience the early results. People respond differently. The rooms feel different. Conversations landing differently. And then the old pull returns. A stressful day. A relationship that triggers the old patterns. A moment where the ego demands its satisfaction, and the silence feels like too high a price. And they tell themselves they will return to the practice tomorrow. And sometimes they do. But the people who truly cross the threshold are not the ones who never falter. They are the ones who treated every faltering as information rather than failure. Every reactive moment is a data point. Every unnecessary word is a reminder rather than a verdict. Because the path to becoming a silently powerful person is not a straight line. It is a spiral. You return to the same lessons at greater depth. The same situations test you at higher stakes. The same temptations arrive in more sophisticated forms. But each time you pass through the spiral, you are not at the beginning again. You are at a higher level of the same truth. And the truth deepens with every pass until it is no longer something you are practicing. It is something you are made of. This is where most people stop. But you are not most people. You did not come this far through 10 chapters of uncompromising truth to hand the last mile back to the noise. The truth is, the world you inhabit needs what you are becoming. Not performatively. Not strategically. Genuinely. Every room you enter and do not dominate creates space for something real to happen. Every conversation you hold where you listen more than you speak gives another person the rare experience of being genuinely heard. Every moment of composure under provocation demonstrates to everyone watching, consciously or not, that a different way of responding to pressure is available. You are not just building your own authority. You are shifting the temperature of every environment you move through, making it slightly more honest, slightly more human, slightly more still. Say nothing. Change everything. You do not need to announce the shift. Say nothing. Change everything. You do not need to explain the new version of yourself to the people who knew the old one. Let them feel the difference before they can name it. Let them notice that something has settled in you that cannot be unsettled. Say nothing. Change everything. Because the most profound transformation a person can undergo is the one that happens quietly, that shows in the presence, and that speaks for itself in every room you will ever enter for the rest of your life. Most people react. You choose. And the choice you are making right now, at the end of this book, is the most important one. Not the choice of a technique to apply in your next meeting. The choice of a standard to carry into the rest of your life. The standard of the person who does not need to be the loudest to be the most significant. The person whose words, when they come, land like decisions rather than noise. The person whose silence is not empty but full. Full of observation, of understanding, of the patient's confidence in someone who has seen the room clearly and chosen the right moment to act. This is where most people stop. You do not stop here. The truth is, you have always had this capacity. The stillness was always available. The depth was always there. This book did not give you anything new. It removed the layers of conditioning that were covering what was already yours. The noise trap was never your nature. It was your training. And training can be undone. It has been, across 10 chapters, one principle at a time. What remains underneath is exactly who you were always capable of being. Silent. Deliberate, unshakable, present. The most powerful person in any room is not the one who owns the conversation. It is the one who could end it with 4 words and chooses to wait. That person is you now. Not tomorrow. Not after more practice. Not when the conditions are more favorable. Now. Carry it out of this book and into every room that is waiting for the shift that only your presence can create. Say nothing. Change everything. You came into this book full of words. You leave it knowing their true weight. Every chapter brought you closer to the same truth, approached from a different direction. The loudest person is the weakest. Silence communicates what speech cannot. The great figures of history did not explain themselves. Your body broadcasts power before your mouth opens. The observer outperforms the performer. Every single time. Words spent with restraint land like intention. Provocation only works on people who still need to be understood. The quiet leader is the one people follow into silence. The silently powerful person is not performing. They have arrived. And this philosophy is not a season. It is a permanent state of being. You have been fed a lie your entire life. That confidence is loud. That intelligence announces itself. That power speaks first and often. None of it is true. The most respected person you will ever meet in your life will be someone who made you feel heard without saying much, who made you feel outmatched without trying, who carried themselves with the particular ease of someone who has absolutely nothing to prove. That person can be you. Starting today. Starting with the next conversation you enter, do not dominate. Starting with the next provocation you receive, do not answer. Starting with the next room you walk into slowly, calmly, and completely on your own terms. Here is your challenge. For the next 7 days, speak only when necessary. Observe more than you participate. Hold the pause 1 second longer than is comfortable. Let others fill the silence you create, and watch what they reveal. Watch what shifts in how people treat you, look at you, and listen to you when you finally do speak. Say less. Become more. The most powerful thing you will do today is close this book and say absolutely nothing.